to our power grid issues in the Hudson Valley, part 2. For those of you that joined us back in January, we did have a part 1 in Marbletown at the Marbletown Community Center. It was very well attended, and we had a lively discussion there, and our 2-hour thing stretched to well over 3 hours. Hopefully that won't happen tonight, but we'll try to economize as best we can. This second forum on power grid issues affecting our area will give the public and elected officials the opportunity to hear details on how a proposed transmission upgrade in Ulster County would impact our communities. The forum will also provide an overview and update on the new capacity zone and its economic and energy impacts on our region. At our last forum, quite a bit of the discussion was on the new capacity zone, and we really didn't have an opportunity to really discuss the options available. So we hope to bring more of that out this evening. To tell you a little bit about me, my name is Carl Chipman. I'm the big mouth that comes to legislative sessions and everything else, but I am the supervisor of the town of Rochester. I'm also president of the Ulster County Association of Town Supervisors and Village Mayors. I've been fortunate to work with Citizens for Local Power for the last several months on several issues. I've never met such a dedicated bunch of ladies in my life. And I've learned so much from them. And when I get done with a meeting at our town hall, I leave with such energy, and I really do have hope for our area, for the future, for our kids. I do see the opportunity for a sustainable energy future controlled locally. And that's the key, local control. Home rule, baby. Okay? So I welcome all of you tonight. I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. We have some very special guests here this evening, and I'm really going to try not to miss anybody. I had spies all over the place. Tell me when somebody comes in, so let's see how it worked out. Okay, first I'd like to welcome George Christian from Representative Chris Gibson's office. George? Jenna will be speaking on some of the efforts from these offices very shortly. Next, I'd like to welcome Elena Henneberry, representing Senator Chichik's office. We also have Nicole Parody, who is representing Assemblyman Kevin Cahill's office. We're very honored to have some of our legislators here. I see Jim Maloney over there. Don Gregorius. I see Peter Loughran snuck in. My personal legislator from Rochester, Lynn Hartman. And very special, Manajo Green, who's part of CLP, and has been tireless working for the environment and smart energy solutions. Also, I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine, Supervisor Jim Quigley from the town of Ulster. Next, I see Dennis Doyle snuck in from Ulster County Planning. And I don't know if he's arrived here yet. Hector Rodriguez, legislator from New Paltz area. This is what happens when they get done with the caucus. They sneak in. And Legislator Provenzano from the city of Kingston. We are also, I don't know if he's joined us yet, we have Jeffrey Domansky, who represents Courtney Strong, who's a NYSERDA contractor, and is very important in energy savings that, for our residents and for our municipalities, your government. Okay. I need binoculars. Last but definitely not least, I'd like to just speak a quick moment about the team that puts this together, CLP, Citizens for Local Power, and what a fantastic group of people. Of course, we have Jessica Berry, who's not here tonight. been meeting with her for months. The insights she has are fantastic. Susan Gillespie. Let's see where Susan is. There she is. Of course, Manna, who's part of CLP. Dawn Miola. Amy Trumpeter. And I saved last but not least, co-founder of CLP, and who's going to speak in just a moment, is Jen Metzger. She's going to explain the process. I am so awestruck by the work that she does, and really, give her a hand, please. Jen?
I do want to say it's really actually a complete team effort on everyone's part, including Carl's. I'm not a really loud speaker. I don't have a mic. If you can't hear me, please let me know. There's no mic there. So energy decisions are routinely made in Albany and Washington, D.C. that affect our communities. But we often don't know about them here at the local level. And until it's too late and we can't really do anything about it. So what Citizens for Local Power is trying to do is have informational forums like this, get information to the communities, so that our communities, so that we can be better informed and be engaged in these issues if we need to be. The two plans we're going to hear about tonight, the federally mandated new capacity zone and the state's transmission upgrade plans, are at different stages in their decision-making processes. We're still fairly early in the review process of the transmission upgrade proposals, but we're pretty late in the process on the new capacity zone. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, without any outreach to affected communities here in the Hudson Valley, approved this new zone last August. And it's scheduled to go into effect on May 1st of this year. The idea behind this new zone, and you'll hear more details about it tonight, but it's basically to raise the capacity price of electricity in our region in order to encourage investment in additional generating capacity in our region. CLP believes there is better ways to achieve the same objective. But you're going to hear, and we felt it's important for you to hear all the different sides of this issue, which you will tonight. Because of opposition to the new capacity zone by the New York Public Service Commission, Central Hudson Fortis, and other parties to these federal proceedings, it's actually the decision is in rehearing now, which opens an additional opportunity for communities to make their voices heard. And Ulster and Dutchess counties have definitely been making their voices heard lately. Rochester Town Supervisor and our moderators, Carl Chipman really got this ball rolling. He introduced a resolution opposing the new capacity zone at the association's meeting in February. He has been a great leader on this, not only on this issue, but also on fracking, and this is all of a piece. All these energy issues are tied together. The Ulster County Legislature also gave the new capacity zone their immediate attention and adopted a resolution of opposition, as did the towns of Rosendale, my hometown, Woodstock, Plattekill, New Paltz, Rochester, Denning, Olive, and Marbletown. On the other side of the river, the Dutchess County Legislature, the towns of Pleasant Valley and Clinton, and probably other towns that I don't know about, have adopted their own resolutions of opposition. All of these local actions have now garnered the attention of our federal elected officials, which is really important because the new capacity zone is a federal ruling, and their intervention on our behalf is very important to affecting the decision. Congressman Gibson recently sent a letter to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission expressing his serious concerns about this new zone and remains engaged on this issue, as we can see by his office's representation here tonight. Senator Schumer just a few days ago came to Dutchess and Ulster County to underline his intention to try to stop this new zone from going into effect on May 1st. And we'd like to acknowledge and thank County Executive Mike Hine, who personally reached out to the senator on this issue. Towns have also been making their voices heard on transmission upgrade plans. The towns of Rosendale, New Paltz, Denning, Olive, and Marbletown have all adopted resolutions telling the PSC the kinds of things we would like to see in upgrade plans. And there has been, for some time now, a lot of really organized engagement in the transmission proceedings by communities across the river in Dutchess. And I'm sure there are some people here from Dutchess tonight. Tonight we're going to hear a presentation by Boundless Energy on its proposal to the Public Service Commission to upgrade transmission lines, which include the lines running through Ulster County. It's the only one of the 4 proposals whose proposal would affect Ulster County lines. We're also going to hear the proposal from Transco, which is a group of I think it's all right, of the transmission owning companies in New York. Their proposal will affect the lines running through Dutchess, among other counties. There are altogether 4 proposals before the PSC, and 1 will ultimately be chosen. Now, the problems with our transition system that these proposals are meant to address are very real, and we'll be hearing more about that tonight. CLP also we have an issue summary, if there are copies left, and a map of the new capacity zone, which you can take with you. There are lots of materials over there, actually, for you all. I just want to close by suggesting that when we think about these grid issues, we need to think about the big energy picture. Right now, we are on a path to vastly expand our reliance on natural gas in this state, in this country. But we need to be doing more to create a diverse energy portfolio that relies much more on renewable sources of energy. We all experienced the super painful electricity price hikes that were at least partly driven, in good measure driven by the winter spike in natural gas prices. It's had an extreme impact. This one small restaurant in Rosendale saw its bills go up from $690 to over $1,330. And these kinds of cost increases can be crippling to small businesses and really hurt people just trying to pay the bills. Fossil fuel prices are volatile, and natural gas prices are likely going to increase as we start to export more and more liquefied natural gas, which appears to be the direction our federal government is heading in terms of approvals. And it is not a clean energy option. When we start to consider the environmental and health costs of fracking and the climate impacts of methane leakage, which is a serious issue with natural gas. So when we hear these presentations tonight, it's important to consider whether the plans discussed will help us reach our goal of achieving a cleaner, less vulnerable, less costly, and more resilient energy system. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Unfortunately, I did miss somebody in the honored attendees. His name's Brad Wheel. He's an alderman from the city of Kingston. Brad, I'm very sorry we missed you.
Alderman Bill Perry.
Okay, where's Bill? Thank you for coming. Next, I'd like to introduce Ron Leonard. Ron is with Echo NRG LLC. Ron's going to show us a few slides to provide context for the presentations this evening we're going to hear. Ron, take it over.
Thank you. Glad you all showed up. This is a very important piece of information that you need to understand. And what I want to do is give you the big picture. And when you see the big picture, you want to ask all these other presenters the questions that you need to make yourself informed. Now, I want to start with the prerequisite.
It's hard to hear you.
I think you need to move towards the center of the room, Ron.
I think you need a microphone.
Even my
About time we got it.
Thank you.
microphone
You
works.
didn't tell us that you needed a mic. I'm blaming you.
Thank you, Hector.
Microphone?
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. So to start the presentation, I want to start with the prerequisites joke. How many economists does it take to screw in a light bulb? Anybody? Well, it actually turns out to be 8 economists, and they all have a different opinion on how to do it. So we have a different problem here today. We only have to choose between 4 different companies that want to provide a solution for an energy problem, physical energy problem. And the physical energy system is the energy highway. Energy highway is basically bringing power from the power plant to your home.
Can you stand closer to the screen so you're not blocking? Thank you.
Now blocking you. So, our esteemed Public Service Commission has set up a procedure on how to deal with the energy highway question, how we understand 4 different people have 4 different solutions, and they've come up with a process that's sort of a first of its kind, and the developers submit to the Public Service Commission their proposal. Public Service Commission has actually had a scoping meeting on the 19th of the month, and basically they haven't endorsed any particular proposal, but the process is starting. The available electric resource is basically what we're dealing with as a resource issue. And what we have in terms of the resource issue is a bottleneck between Leeds and this location and everything south of us. So if we look, again, Randall, we have a energy deficit, one more, in terms of the power resources that are required and the power resources we have available. So the new capacity zone. Everybody is very interested in this capacity zone. What does it mean to us? Well, I want to point out the one sentence that's important to you here, which is the one right here where it says, you can expect to see an increase in your electricity price as of May 1st. A little bit of a shock. So what does this capacity zone consist of? Basically central Hudson and Orange and Rockland, the lower portion of New York State above New York City. One of the issues that you can use to help you in terms of your electricity costs is conserve. Another simple one is buy more efficient appliances. Other means of getting energy is something that you should be looking at right now. One of those could be solar on your house, if that's capital. There's a broad coalition forming, not in just New York State, but in the region, to deal with this issue that FERC is imposing its goals on many different stakeholders. And I want to read you basically the last section to give you an understanding of how this affects you. It's important to understand that the capacity and rates associated with it impact all customers and markets where capacity is a requirement. No matter who is supplying the power, utility company, energy service company, and because capacity is bought and sold through market mechanisms, price can fluctuate based on many factors. In the case of the new capacity zone, transmission constraints are high, which drive prices higher. That costs us more for energy. The hope is that over time, pricing in the new capacity zone will dictate the need for more generation and prices will get better. Not necessarily the case, and time will tell, and it's going to take a lot of time. So the coalition is saying to FERC that FERC must consider rate impacts on retail electric customers. Market participants trying to protect their economic interests dominate FERC and the RTO stakeholder process. There's a lot of special interests here that want to produce power and protect their right to do that and keep the price profitable for them. But you're the consumer on the other side. So market participants trying to protect their economic interests dominate, while the interests of retail consumers, those charged with protecting them, are often lost in the process. It is up to the Commission, FERC, to ensure that capacity procurement constraints the associated market rules work for the retail electric consumers. That ultimately pay the bills, and not for the market participants who have the most resources to devote to the administrative process. You're not going to necessarily hire a lawyer and go before FERC and state your case, but FERC is actually ruling on your special interest, and that is a process that we have to deal with. And the process is costing us. If you look at the chart for New York State, the price for power is continually going up. What we're thinking is going to occur is this curve all the way over on the side here is just going to get much steeper. It's going to cost us a lot more very quickly. That's a problem. It's a problem if you're a homeowner, it's a problem if you're a business. It's a problem no matter how you look at it, and we need to understand what our choices are and how we can deal with that as an issue. So there are significant issues with the grid. The grid consists of power generators and the lines that carry the power. So if you understand where our power is coming from and look at the age associated with those things, you notice that 59% of the generating equipment is 30 years old. So if you were driving your car every day to work and your car was 30 years old, that would probably be, I guess, an antique. Now, it'll probably get you to work, but you may worry about it every day. Well, the energy highway has that problem. We are dealing with old equipment. Same thing with the power transmission equipment itself. 84% of it is built before 1980s. It's old, it's antiquated, it's inefficient, and we have problems because of that. One of the reasons that we have to have the new energy highway and fix problems is because really very little money has been put into the system to keep it up, to improve it, to make it consistent and reliable for us all. So we're facing lots of issues. One of them is higher peak loads due to global warming, record electricity demand. There was a 34 gigawatt load in New York State on July 19th, 2013. There was a significant load this winter that went over 25 megawatts, or 25,000 megawatts, 25 gigawatts. That's a big load in the middle of the winter, sort of something we've never seen before. Obviously, it's very cold out, that's why the load occurs, but when that does occur, we see shortages of fuels. 50% of the power in New York State comes from natural gas. When the natural gas is a competing fuel to heat your house, power your electricity, prices rise exponentially. It hits us in the pocketbook. And the reliance on natural gas is basically putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And because of that, we're going to see continuous stress in the system. Moreland Commission. We found out one little sneaky issue with utilities. That is that utility personnel are reaching retirement age. And those people aren't really readily or easily replaced. And that has become a significant issue right now. So all these things are hitting at once. We have a system under stress. We have lots of issues to deal with. And I want you to pay attention to the ISO, the Public Service Commission, the presenters that follow in terms of how we can solve our energy problems and the solutions that they provide. And I think we're in good hands as long as you can find a solution that works for you.
Thank you, Ron. Now let's move into the meat of our presentation. Proposed transmission upgrades. How do the proposals differ in their impacts on costs, on communities, and the environment?
Could you use the mic?
Okay. Let's move on to proposed transmission upgrades. How do the proposals differ on their impacts on costs, communities, and the environment? Next up will be John Dodson from Boundless Energy. John is the principal of Boundless Energy and the company's executive vice president for development. Boundless Energy is one of the 4 companies that have submitted proposals to the Public Service Commission to upgrade transmission. The company's plan includes upgrades to the line running through Ulster County, and John's company is the only one that involves Ulster County. So I welcome John Dodson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks to Jen and Susan and Joe. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. Coming back for a second time around. This time hopefully I'll get to see some of the magic ingredients that allow us to do some things that do let us operate a little more in keeping with the distributed generation, the things of the future more than the past perhaps. Boundless has got a little different pedigree, even though it came from utilities, and you really have to start with understanding of utilities before you can expect to be able to do this stuff. Are we okay over there?
In a second.
Yeah, and I want to talk about 3 things, really, and we've got a short period of time to do it in, so I may talk a little fast, and I apologize. I am John Dodson. My name will come up there in a minute, and we'll figure out how you can get in touch with me if you want to. The first thing I'd like to mention is the capacity rate increase. The capacity zone came about because a Harvard economist back in 2000 came up with a process called LBMP, which is the local base marginal pricing idea. And basically, if you've got 2 places in America where the price is high here and not so high over here, and they're very close to each other, there's something wrong, right? So they say there's a market failure. And if there's a market failure, they're going to fix it. They watch it for a while, they do some studies, and the way they fix it is, it may be bad, they're going to make it a lot worse. And make it so bad that somebody will do something. And that's what they're trying to do now. So they're going to jack this price up down here on all of us below Albany, basically, all the way down to the city, actually. It doesn't stop, it's not just the Hudson Valley, but we have a disproportionate part of it. And in that area, there's $370 million or so that's going to end up being charged to our bills, distributed throughout everybody that uses electricity. So that will encourage either generation or more transmission. Transmission is generally faster, a little less expensive. Generation will catch up. So we have 4 transmission projects that have been chosen out of 130 proposals of the Governor's Energy Highway. The governor anticipated, or his people anticipated, this was one of the big problems that FERC looked at, and back in 2009 they said they were going to do this. Everybody, oh no, don't do that. At last, some of the Public Service Commissioners here tonight tried to tell them that we're going to fix this with this energy highway. And FERC came back and said, okay, we hear you, but under the LBMP, until you do something, it doesn't count. So they have to know that really something is actually going to happen. It has to actually happen and see the prices come down. This big differential needs to be disappear. It needs to disappear in order for this to happen. So that's why we're here tonight. We are a bunch of guys, and if we ever get some slides up here, we will have...
John, don't complain. I had to do this for Ron, okay? That wasn't the plan.
I know. We had a little extra piece put in here. The Boundless group is a little odd, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. Starts with a real utility person. I ran into him in 2000. I was a military guy. I'm a West Point graduate. I did 3 tours in Vietnam, came back and went to Harvard and got smart and became a professor of economics and energy policy. So I said, okay, let's do renewables because the military doesn't know how to do those. They need to do them in the future. All right. So this is how you can find me. I live down the river a little bit. Boundless Energy 446-7104, and I've gotten a lot of calls, particularly from the East Bank folks, where we've had a lot of real support. And the capacity rate hike is going to hit us all. There are a couple of things we can do for the West Bank too, though, because there are 4 ways for power to get from north to south in this state, down to the big load center in the city. And there are 2 of them go right down through Columbia and Dutchess County from Leeds over there on the East Bank. They're twin 345s. They carry a couple thousand megawatts. There's another one way out west, and that's Leeds Path West. That was built by NYPA because the utilities didn't want to do it. And it's also twin 345s. The 4th one is here. And that's the problem, because it's only a single 345. It's a weak link. And if something gets overloaded, this is where it'll break. It also means that you could use more capacity up here. So there's a couple of things that this new line will help with. And the best thing is that it won't hurt anything, because when we get through, you won't be able to tell anything happened. Okay, first slide. This is the problem. That's what I was talking about before. That is our system, ladies and gentlemen. Other countries plan their systems. They have one entity in charge of it. That ain't what happened here. Every little town, Edison was an American. We invented electricity, right? We came up with it first. So each town got its own utility, and each utility was a monopoly because it made sense. It's a natural monopoly, one set of wires. But as they grew, they bumped up against each other. Now we got 550 monopolies. And it was never planned, so that the system of transmission system is the worst in the developed world, actually. It needs reinforcing badly. But you have to get these utilities to agree and talk to each other, and they don't do that all the time as much as we'd like them to. And the system is changing. The technology they can use now is much better, much faster, and that's why we can do what we're going to do that I'm going to explain to you today. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is Edison and Alexander Graham Bell. If Mr. Bell came back today and you pulled out your phone, which I've got one here somewhere, he had no idea what to do with it. But if Thomas Edison came back today, in about a month and a half, he could take over one of our utilities. We have not done a whole lot of things since we started. So, next slide, please. This is Boundless. Again, I met them in 2000. I was really impressed with them because I was trying to do renewable energy microgrids on military bases. I needed to get that power into the grid. To do that, I had to work with utilities. And even though I had taught utility policy, I quickly found out that what I thought I knew about utilities, I really didn't know. It's a whole different world. It's like the military. If you're not a utility person in that culture and understand what they're doing and how they do it, you're not going to get very far. And fortunately, John Tompkins did that for 25 years, and he's a genius that happened to end up in the utility business. So he joined me and helped me get my military microgrids done, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, he said, I'm going to do some stuff in New York. They really need some help. Would you come and join me? So I've been working with him since then. He's also extremely environmentally oriented, which makes it easy for me because they had no environmental dissenters on this magic project that was done. Neptune was the most successful project in North America, on time, under budget. Every single one of the other big projects, only been 5 or 6 of them in this class, every one of them over budget, $100, $200 million a piece. John got it done. And he helped me a lot, and we were able to work together pretty easily. Next slide, please. This is all the parties. My John, you can hardly see him up there, but that big heavyset guy is Tompkins. He's the genius that came up with all the ideas. That ugly guy next is me, and the next one is a Harvard lawyer, Charlie Pratt. He was the NYPA lawyer for many years. I recruited him. Rod Lindquist was a classmate of John's in his engineering school. Also a very bright guy who's been in business as well. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our system. I know it's hard to see. This is a schematic, so the distances aren't very good. But if you look, Leeds is right in the middle there. Maybe I can get my magic pointer to, yeah, there you go. Leeds, okay, and this is the path that everybody's using. Leeds to Pleasant Valley, except Grid, who had found a little bit better route. But NextEra, which is a really Florida Power and Light, a very large utility, $1 billion outfit that won't let you go in their area, but they go in everybody else's area. And then LS Power, who has Wall Street pedigree now, but they were some good engineers at one time. They own a lot of generation, did a lot of cogen. They're both from out of state. And this is the route they're going to follow, which is what the NISO said to do originally, what National Grid was going to do years ago, but never got done. So now they're going to go down there, but it's very crowded. It's already 2 sets of 345. It's the heaviest line into the city, in the whole state. So it's hard to squeeze in there. So they plan to go alongside it and take up new right-of-way, new land. That's a problem on the other side of the river. We are doing something a little different. Remember I said there were 4 ways? We're taking the weak one and we're making it the strongest one, and that's over here. And we're going to take it from Leeds, and we're going to do something very simple. We're just going to change wires. Central Hudson's line, but we're going to take their lines down and put up new carbon fiber lines used out west all the time now, but not too much in the east because utilities don't like to change, because they like to do things the way they did them last year. Carries twice as much power for half of the weight, a little bit less than half the weight. Okay, so that's an easy job, comparatively speaking, and a cheap job. From here to here, it really is amazing. We go into the system, and we use the little 115 line, 115,000 line, which is really just getting down to the distribution to feed the villages. There's a whole bunch of them going south, and they're only half full of electrons. There's space in there. So we've put something called series compensation on there, which is a bunch of capacitors, and say, hey, electrons, go this way, without building any towers or tearing anything up or even changing anything. We can get all that power, 1,200 megawatts, to go all the way down to Roaston. Roaston is a substation, or a generation station, some of you know, but it has its own substation. There we drill 2 holes, go under the river, and, oh, go back a sec. Yeah, go back one more. There they are. Those are series compensation. There's a bunch of cans, but ours won't be quite that big. Well, it might be that big, but it fits right into a substation. It'll be into the Hurley Avenue, which is just a little bit to the west of here, as you guys probably know, and Kingston. So we get down to here by changing 2 wires, a set of wires, and from here we go into existing wires all the way down to Newburgh, basically. There we got to do some work, and there we go underground, and I'll show you how we do that in just a second. Okay, next slide. This is the things that we think we can do better. Hopefully we have the shortest. Our whole project's only 30-something miles. Everybody else's is 65, and all their projects together are over 100 miles. We have no environmental impact. When we get done, you won't know we did it. You really will not know. There's nothing you can do with a pair of binoculars that would tell you that anything had been done. And it's the fastest permitting. If we could just go on our own, we could be done with this permitting in this year and actually start working. We can build this thing in 1 year because we're only doing 2 things. Change the wires, drill 2 holes. That's work, and that's expensive. Rather than mess up the bottom of the Hudson, which may have some PCBs in it, we drill down, got to go 40 feet below the bottom of the river, over the other side, back up the other side, and then we stay underground all the way over to East Fishkill. So we go around the problem, and the rest of them are trying to use the traditional route of going through the problem. And that's the problem. Here's the problem, because then they generally need more land. National Grid is telling me that they can squeeze into that little 115 car that they've got, but they own it, and they may have a way of doing that. They got to change all the 115s to do that. It's going to be a trick, but maybe they'll do it. Next slide. Okay, this is what they're all together. These are the transmission guys. I could tell you a little bit about. The Transco has never really been formed. They're just not a legal entity. They can't quite get their act together because the independent transmission companies were designed by FERC or encouraged by FERC in the last few years in order to lower the prices, but you're supposed to be an independent transmission company. These guys are all regulated utilities. They have tariffs already. So when they come to FERC, they get a higher tariff as a transmission company. So they'd rather do that than get their own tariff in their own territory at 9 or 10%, but they can get 11 or 12% theoretically from FERC. So that's what this is all about. They got a whole bunch of projects. Everybody had 6 of them, so they all had a project to put in there. Only one that counts for us is the Knickerbocker Pleasant Valley, and that's the probably better solution than the other 2 guys are doing north to south. Okay, next slide. Next era, heavyweight, big guys. These are Florida Power and Light. They've got 64 miles to go. They'll tell you they're a billion-dollar company and they can do anything, and they can. They can do a lot of things the rest of us can't do. North American Transmission I have a little more regard for, but they're using basically the same route. You can't trust their numbers on their cost yet. You really need to go to the New York ISO, which is here tonight, and let them do a KRS on all our projects, because people are not necessarily telling the truth about what they're going to cost. So you can't use their numbers yet. Okay, next one. This is what the towers look like coming down this way. Those are, and they will, okay, back up a second. Okay, back up. All right, now, this is what the tower's going to look like after we've worked on them. Okay, go forward. It's a real trick. Same deal, right? Okay, there won't be any change. It's the same thing. All we're going to do is take those 3 sets of wires there. You see they're each double because they're like the electrons like to be concentrated by 2 wires together. And then we're going to take them down, and we're going to do it on the shoulder months in the fall and in the spring, so that we don't disrupt the flow and we keep the system going as long as we can without having any problems. And by the way, the EMF is not that much more, very small. Okay, next slide. This is the trick that we're using, and this is more expensive for the wire, but it's so much cheaper because we stay in the right-of-way. Okay, we're using carbon fiber and the trapezoidal face aluminum. Electrons travel on the outside of the wire. This has more outside surface, carries twice as much. These 2 guys, CTC and ACCR, will be the guys that will probably sell us the wire. The old wire is round, and it's got steel in the middle. That's why it's heavy. The new carbon fiber is much lighter, more expensive. Go ahead.
1 minute, John.
Oh, jeez. I won't be able to finish. All right, horizontal drilling. This is the way we do it. We go down, we go under, we go back up the other side, keep going. Underground cables, if it's lightweight, you can bury it, but with AC, you do have to put a pipe, and we've got a way of doing that to keep it cool. Go ahead. This is the way we go around underwater and go into the river. By putting it in this configuration, it keeps the EMF concentrated. It doesn't get out. Next slide. You can see it here. That's a logmetric scale, and that's how much EMF. You dropped it all the way down a factor of 10 when you do that concentration. They figured this out in Europe. Okay, go ahead. Yep, these are some of the guys we work with. Siemens is our partner. What we do is basically we get a big, heavyweight partner to do the construction, and then we turn it back over to the outfit that owns it for the maintenance and operation. We turn them over with a much better system, and then we monitor the hell out of the actual construction because it's our money too, and we're a lot more careful than most utilities. This is how you can get in touch with me. Wait, go back a second. It has everybody's websites. If you go to leadspathwest.com, we have everybody else on our website, so you can get to all the others if you want to get there. And I will be happy. Yeah, here's some of the things I'd like you to think about. To me, it should be the fastest, least damaging, and the one that costs the least makes sense. Those are the things that really should be the things, but we're playing all sorts of games right now, and we're going through a process which could take a long time the way we're going right now. Okay, I'll be happy to answer questions when we get around to them. Thank you very much.
Next up is Kevin Cushing. He's stakeholder manager for National Grid and the company's executive he's responsible for community outreach and education. National Grid is one of the group of New York transmission-owning companies going by the name of Transco. That they have also submitted a proposal for upgrading transmission. Their proposal would affect lines on the Dutchess side of the river. So I'd like to introduce Kevin.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Cushing. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and an opportunity for myself and my team, Allison Ray and Alex Roth from Burns & McDonald. They work with me on doing community outreach. We've done a number of public meetings and forums over the past 6 months. There's a lot of faces in here that I recognize. Lots changed since I probably talked to you last, and we're kind of excited to talk to you about some of those changes. And probably talk more just about our project versus the other three. I think it's probably more appropriate. The presentation is about 12 slides, and it basically is a general overview, but I think we're going to hit topics that are very, very important because in the 6 months that we met with a lot of the folks in this room, we heard what the concerns were. Before I get to the project itself, the reason for the projects, the reason for the Energy Highway is congestion. And I know some of you folks are familiar with what congestion is, and it's basically the inefficient ability of power generators in upstate to move their power from upstate to downstate. That inefficiency causes problems in price. It doesn't allow renewable energy into the grid, doesn't allow cheaper energy into the grid. That's a problem. That's congestion. I'll wait for Alex to catch up here. All right, well, we'll start and they'll catch up. Basically what the problem is besides congestion is the transmission system. Our transmission system in New York consists of 11,000 circuit miles of high voltage transmission. It's a lot of circuit miles, and virtually, I believe 84% of it was built before 1980. And within the next 10 to 30 years, 4,700 miles will need to be replaced. We've had huge infrastructure problems in upstate New York and downstate New York. They need to be addressed. The projects that are being discussed by myself and Mr. Dodson and others, they meet just a small part of the problem. They're a necessary first step. The timeline, which just kind of gives you an idea of where we've been and where we're going to a degree. Back in April 2013, the PSC had an order that asked for projects from private developers such as Boundless and existing transmission operators to come up with projects that moved at least 1,000 megawatts from upstate to down. All developers and transmission operators were given until October 1st to submit very, very high-level plans. We all did so. And January 14th, things got a little confusing because the governor's speech, State of the State speech, indicated there may be an expedited process for getting these projects through. And because of the competitive nature of these projects, that's not going to be the case. They'll follow the normal, so to speak, Article 7 process for large electric transmission projects. On February 2014, the Public Service Commission came back out and said, take a look at your projects, rethink them, based on the input that we've given you, based on the input that you've heard out in the field of what's important, building within rights of way. You're free to go back into this process and come up with alternative ideas. And the next step is basically getting to the Part B of the Article 7 process. That is to be determined. We'll find that out later. Our project. Our project is considerably different than Boundless. It's 153 miles. It traverses 8 counties. It traverses 30 towns. The 8 counties, it starts in Marcy, outside of Utica, New York. Goes east from Oneida County to Herkimer County, Montgomery, Albany, Schenectady, Rensselaer, Columbia, and Dutchess. I can't name the 30 towns off the top of my head. It interconnects with other service territories, other distribution companies such as NYPA, NYSEG, and Central Hudson. The project that we're out and proposing, it runs within existing National Grid transmission corridors. We've owned them for 70, 80 years. We've owned them, we maintain them. The transmission lines that are in there now belong to us. There's 1,500 neighboring landowners that are on either side of our proposed route. We've been in touch with each and every one of them, or we've tried to, through not only letters, we send them postcards, we've had public meetings. We feel that the best thing we can do is let them know what we're doing and get their input and find out what their concerns are. That high-level route was designed and the scoping documents were submitted on October 1st, 2013, and the project that we're proposing is still very similar to what was proposed on October 1st. This is a difficult map to read, but this basically shows you how it starts in Oneida County, heads east basically to Albany County, Rensselaer, and then south to Pleasant Valley. Project design, and it's loud and clear that we're not going to get a project approved by the state or anyone else, communities, if it doesn't stay within the existing transmission corridor. National Grid's project will stay completely within the existing transmission corridor that it currently owns and operates. We will not be going to property owners on either side of the transmission corridor and asking for any right-of-way. We don't need it. We don't need it to construct. We have more than enough room to build what we need to build without asking for additional rights-of-way. No additional rights-of-way, no eminent domain, non-issue. Next slide.
We're having a problem.
Huh. Project benefits. And I think this is important because we don't want to do this again 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. This has been somewhat of a painful process for everyone, including John's company, my company, Public Service Commission, but most of all, everybody in this room. This has been difficult. Our project, we estimate, will probably between 1,200 and 1,500 megawatts, move 1,200 to 15 megawatts of power from north to south. That's more than what the Public Service Commission originally asked for. We think it's the right project because it will be done once and it will be done right. The other project benefits are reliability. It'll be safer. It'll be more rigid to storms. It'll be more rigid in power quality-wise for economic development purposes. I also worked in economic development, and companies that are looking to site high-tech, high energy use manufacturing plants, there's not a lot of places in New York to put them. There's not a lot of capacity. This project will provide capacity zones where if you want to put a chip fab somewhere along those lines, we can do it. We can have jobs for kids. We can have jobs for our grandchildren. We can keep them in New York State. We can grow the state. And tax revenue. Anything that we do, anything that we build will obviously be assessed. And as it's assessed, we'll pay property taxes. We tend to be one of the largest property taxes in virtually every town. Best technologies. As John said, Thomas Edison probably wouldn't be real surprised with what the grid looks like. It doesn't look a whole lot different. It is what it is. But what it is there have been improvements. There have been improvements to construction policies. There's improvements to conductors. The substations, which are part of our project, which there is 3, will be built in such a way that they'll be safer from terrorist threats, safer from actually just local vandalism. And that's just basically done through some things that we can talk about and some things that we can't, but it's basically by new technologies in electronics, relaying, and communication systems. We're evaluating the latest generation of conductors, the ones John put up there. We actually use them. We don't call it new technology, we call it recent technology. It's good technology, no question. If it works for our project, we're going to use it. We're still designing, we're still engineering. People said we couldn't build it within the existing right-of-way. We can, and we will. And there are many folks that have questions about our ability to do that. We've been doing this for nearly 100 years between Niagara, Mohawk, and National Grid. We know we can do it. We will do it if asked. Outreach. We've, prior to October 1st, our outreach team met with each town, and we tried to meet individually with the towns. If we couldn't, we dropped off materials to them. And then we reached out to every town, every municipality, tried to set up outreach and public forums and open houses. We got to 26 before we kind of did a timeout with that to kind of reboot the process. But we've done 26. We've heard loud and clear what you people are concerned about. You're concerned about land and right-of-way. You're concerned about eminent domain. You're worried about visuals, what you're going to see from your backyard. That's what we're concerned about. That's what we're engineering to. We're your neighbors now. We were your neighbors then. We're going to be your neighbors going forward. It's in our best interest to be a good neighbor, to build a project that meets the needs of the state, and is a project that is in your backyard and one that makes you happy from a visual standpoint, and it does what it needs to do for the state. We need to do the job once. We want to do it right. And that's it.
Thank you, Kevin. What we'd like to do is open up a brief question and answer session here on the projects. I please ask that questions are pertinent to the factual information concerning the projects and that we don't get off on tangents with this. Ma'am?
The National Grid, Hudson, what are you proposing to be building? It's not
Can you
clear.
repeat the questions or use the mic, please?
Somebody pass the microphone. I can't walk.
Thank you. Sir, thank you for your presentation. What are you proposing to be building? I understand you're using the existing transmission lines, but what are you building?
We're using the existing transmission corridor. We're building a new 345 kV transmission line within that corridor.
So that means new pylons and a whole new thing going along.
Not necessarily, and it's not necessarily in the sense it's 153 miles. It's not one solution fits the whole project. There's area of the projects where there will be fewer structures than when we start. Matter of fact, the majority of the project will have fewer structures when the project is completed than when there are there now. We're able to remove some 230 lines in a major part of the western part, so 2 structures will be totally removed and replaced with 1. In other locations, 115 lines will be removed to make room for a new structure for the 345 line. So there'll be a new 345 line. Other lines that are within that transmission line are being modified or removed.
This gentleman in the back.
When you say stay within the corridor, are you talking about the 3D corridor, including height?
Talking really about
Repeat the question, please.
will we be staying in the 3D corridor, meaning not only the width but the height, correct?
Right.
Right now, we have our new structures as engineered right now are 130 feet. We're working to reduce those structures, and we feel very confident that we can, but we're still engineering it. Current structures there are 80, 85.
Lady in the back.
I just had a question about any future homegrown energy that we might want to do in the Hudson Valley, like solar farms. Will that be something that we can tie in? Like this, we're talking transmission. It's just going to go through, or are we going to be able to produce and tap in?
One of the benefits to all these projects basically is to relieve congestion and allow projects such as solar farms and hydro and wind farms who basically can't get financing because they have no place to sell the energy because of the congestion on the grid. There will be opportunities for that, and obviously welcome opportunities.
And the technology to...
Well, technology is there. I mean, I can speak for National Grid Service territories.
John, do you have any comments on that?
A net metering.
Yeah, you generally have to get to a substation to get into a 345 line, you know, but it does free up capacity so that there's more room to get into. And of course, it does also stabilize the grid, makes it stronger. But directly, it's very expensive because you got to go through a couple of steps, and you need a substation to do that. For us over here, we'll go to Leeds or Kingston here at Hurley Avenue. Those are two substations that we can get into. And that's why, by the way, they specified an AC solution, not a DC. The DC is so expensive to get into that you want to go from the point you start to the point you finish. Everywhere you stop, it's $100 million for a converter. So that's why they're looking for AC solutions that network and make the whole system stronger.
Thank you, John. Ma'am, your hand was up. I thought it was you.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I don't need a mic, I'll talk loud. This is for Kevin Cushing. You said that was these lines would be within the existing corridor, and so if that's true, then why are you in touch with 1,500 landowners on both sides if it's already in there? I have two more questions after that.
Obviously, we'd be doing construction within that existing corridor.
Okay.
And some of those construction methods might be changed based on what an abutter wants. I mean, there's different ways you can construct a line. I mean, there's different structures, there's a lot of different things that can be done, and we are certainly open to what your needs are as an abutter.
Okay. One of your points was you said something about electronics and communication systems. What type are you referring to, wireless?
No, well, actually, yes, in the communications, it's wireless. What I'm talking about is within substations. I mean, one technology that certainly changed greatly from Edison's times as far as substations are concerned. Substations are very complex facilities. And the facilities that we would be proposing with our project would have the highest levels of communication electronics for security, safety, terrorism.
Okay, well, you're talking about your best technologies, and you're saying that people are concerned about the visuals. We have a health concern.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not being addressed at all, and it's really, really a big concern.
Well,
Yeah, I have a question too,
Yes,
because the gentleman from Boundless Energy did mention some things related to EMF issues. But you said that you had 26 public forums, and you were finding people were concerned about right-of-ways, eminent domain, etc. But you didn't mention EMF or dirty electricity or wireless or any of these things. Did people not bring those up in the public forums as concerns?
Oh, yeah. We from day one, we're completely in the right of way, and we've always been, we go underground when we have to, and we stay in the right of way, and we use the latest technology. Those are kind of our advantages. And we got a bunch of innovative engineers that really think a little bit outside the box. We do solar, wind, and geothermal in our other lifetime in microgrid, so we're kind of up on the cutting edge that fits into this, and it makes a nice companion to it. And we're very receptive to those ideas because we think that's the future. Yeah.
Well, my question was really, you mentioned EMFs on the gentleman
Oh.
from National Grid did not, and I wanted to direct my question to you.
Okay, Kevin.
Did you have people bringing up concerns about that? Because I believe this is...
yeah, not only did they bring them up, we took out and we went and took measurements of the system as it is today, and it was well under state standards. And we plan to build our 345 line to such a state that it will be well below state standards. We have very conservative construction EMF standards. Always have all throughout the power system.
You here, sir?
Yeah, my name is Rob. I'm from Dutchess County, but I'm also concerned with the whole Hudson Valley region, and I would like to ask both of you, the two main questions I have is the first, the environment. Is it safe for the environment, and how much is going to decrease the cost to the homeowners in this county?
Okay. Yeah, we are too, and that's the big advantage we have is we're not doing much, so we're not damaging much. You know, we're changing wires out and drilling holes underneath the river. But it is true that you got to do some work in there, so there'll be some guys coming and going when you're doing the work. And the environment is always sensitive to destruction during the time of the construction. It's really after the construction is done, the long run to me is the most important. And we don't even do that much construction. We're just changing wires out, so it'll be fairly easy. Environmental impact is really most felt by the people next to it. And that's the stakeholder, the guys he was contacting. They're trying hard to avoid that as much as they can, what they're telling.
Kevin, would you like to speak
Yeah.
to that?
We're required to follow all state and federal environmental laws, and we do. And we mat agricultural lands. We meet all federal and state standards, and we work with the abutters. Obviously, environment is something that's important to all the abutters. It's important to the utilities. National Grid has an incredibly great track record as it policy environment.
Okay, thank you. Sir? Mike.
No, it didn't. That's where I'm going.
Hi, Ed Pell from the town of Clinton. We talked about the new capacity zone and how rates are not the same in upstate New York and in New York City. They differ by a factor of 4 for the basic electricity. So my question to anybody who can answer this is, how much transmission of cheap electricity from upstate will we have to bring down to New York City in order to drive up the upstate rates by a factor of 2 and lower the New York City rates by a factor of 2 to equalize them?
Would anyone like to answer that question? Ma'am? Next to Toby.
Well,
I'd like an answer. I don't know if you're going to get one on that.
It actually doesn't go up that much yet. It really doesn't. It does come down because it's dramatic. But we had, when we started this a couple of years ago, 4,000 excess capacity upstate that couldn't get down here. Now, they're killing off a lot of those plants now, but they still got a lot of extras. So that means there's enough supply and that's what the FERC's trying to do. They're trying to increase the supply to lower the price. But if it were completely fixed, it would be a slight increase. It would be, I'm saying, you're right. And also it would really play havoc for the generators in the city because they need that expensive power. Their whole cost structure is based on that. So there's some people that don't want this to happen. And remember, there's a lot of agendas at work here, guys. And this really gets into politics. The governor wants to do his thing, and there's a lot of things going on here. So it's not just a technical problem that we're dealing with. I have learned a lot more too as we've gone along. I'm getting an education.
As you said, we're going to get into the new capacity
zone
more
very
specifically
shortly. So
right
I
after
really
this.
want to keep it to the plans
To the
themselves.
plans, okay, yep.
Okay? Ma'am? Nope. The price is right. Come on down.
My name is Michelle Hertz. In a study issued by the New York State Health Department, they determined that children with leukemia or brain cancer are more likely than healthy children to be living in homes where the exposure to the magnetic fields generated by electrical power lines is high. There was a $5 million study named the New York State Power Lines Project by the New York State Power Authority and the state's 7 investor-owned utilities. I would like to inform you about that when you talk about these are going to be safe transmission lines. I want to know what health and safety studies have you done or the utilities done with this proposed extreme transmission systems, and will there be pulsing microwave transmitters just like those in ERT smart meters connected to these transmission systems? And are there EIS requirements with your transmission lines?
Would anyone like to answer that?
Yeah, we're not planning on that. As of now, I'm sorry. I don't think, we're not in any way involved with that, and smart meters is a whole different world unto itself.
Well, pulsing microwave radiation transmitters on any of these power lines.
Power
are
lines,
you
right.
involved
It
with
can
that?
be put if you're doing the microgrid. We're not doing anything to do with the microgrids right now. So the microgrid is a small electrical grid. You're
No,
talking
you
about
don't understand.
microwave is you're talking
I'm
about.
saying technology using pulsing microwave
Right, yeah, we're not
radiation
using that
on
technology.
the transmission lines.
And we're not
Right.
using it.
What about communications systems?
That's within a substation. That's
What
so
about the
substations can talk to each
Okay,
other.
Just
but
between
in the
substations, right.
substation, you're talking about using microwave technology.
Not for communications, no.
Well, how are you gonna do it? Is it wireless?
Yes.
Microwave radiation?
Wireless,
Okay.
wireless, yeah.
Yeah, at the substations,
Hey, on this side, we've had this side of the room pretty well. Any of our legislators over there? Or? You, sir.
Ray Oberly from the town of Clinton. A question on the National Grid one. You said you're going to be 130-foot possible structures. Can I ask what design is that structure? Is it going to be the traditional tower? Is it going to be the monopole, 4 foot in diameter, straight up with a light on top, so I'll have candles all the way through my town? Or is it going to be big H's where you're hanging from?
No, we're not suggesting having lights on every tower. We're talking about monopoles. Most of these transmission corridors run through ag. We have farmers farm.
Come on, use the.
Most of our transmission corridor runs through ag properties. Farmers tend to use our land to farm. We have licenses and agreements with them. They've talked to us as we've gone out and spoken to them, and they said they would prefer monopoles. It's easier for them to work around. As of right now, we're talking about structure heights that could be as high as 130. We believe they'll be lower than that. And again, not H-frames, no. And no lights on top.
Gentleman in the black.
My name's Dennis Gendron from Dutchess County. I just have a question for both of you gentlemen. Do you have a proposed cost estimate for this project that will eventually be turned over to the taxpayers?
We do not have a final estimate, and we haven't finished our design. Until the design is complete, we really don't have a cost estimate. We will have a cost estimate when we put in our Part B filing, which we don't know exactly when that'll be, but it'll be sometime in the hopefully near future.
John?
Our construction's about 270 million. Their work will be about 1.2 billion, is what we're estimating at it. But they're doing a lot more work. They're doing stuff upstate and other things, but what they're doing is very expensive. They've got to change things, take them down, put them back up. The cost will be paid by us, though, because it will be going to our rate base, so that the cost really will make a difference eventually. The governor said that you can spend $1 billion. So the utilities heard that, and they expect to spend $1 billion. Now, we came along, very embarrassing, we came along with $270 million. And when you put all the soft costs, it's about 330. But it really, we're not doing that much. And you don't have to do that much to get 1,200 megawatts down to this bottleneck, which is what we were supposed to do when we started out. So that's what we focused on, and we cut it down to just what had to be done.
Thank you. One more over here.
Yeah, I'm having cognitive dissonance here, and I'm very new to this, but on this sheet that I was given, when I walked in, and it is from Boundless Energy.
No, it's from Hudson Valley Concerned Citizens.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, that's not
Then,
clear.
then the question is, there's one thing here, maybe it can be straightened out. Under the column, Bull Does Homes Take Land, I've heard that no such thing is going to happen.
It's absolutely not true.
But here there's a yes. So I
That's
don't
the
know how
submitted
to
projects that are in writing as opposed to the vaporware from the future.
Thank you.
Let's have the panel answer the question. Okay. Anyone who hasn't, yes, ma'am.
I have to just say for the record that it's highly debatable that Thomas Edison was the inventor of electricity. I want to give a plug in. J.P. Morgan wasn't him.
We had lightning long before there was an Edison.
Very good.
It's entirely different
Okay.
society right now.
Right.
And in keeping with that, it's really important, and I might sound like some crazy hippie, but this is more of the same crap. You know what I mean? Come on, guys. Harvard engineers, think outside of the box some more. It can't be all about just for profit. We don't have much time. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to have more questions later, okay? So I'm going to close this down right now, and let's move on with the next part of our presentation. And that is the new capacity zone. What is it? How will it affect rates? What is being done to prevent it? We'll also hear an update on how the FERC is responding to opposition from the public and the PSC. Next, I'd like to introduce James Den. He's the Director of Public Affairs for the New York State Public Service Commission. The PSC is responsible for proceedings on transmission upgrades and will ultimately choose the proposal for the job. That's if the FERC listens to us, okay, which we certainly hope. So, James?
Thanks a lot. In order to save us all some time, I'm going to skip my PowerPoint presentation. I know you're thankful for that, Pam. But I do want to clarify a few things. It's very important to recognize that the AC transmission upgrades proceeding is, in fact, in the early stages. And I want to appreciate all of the folks who've given some presentations so far this morning, this evening. But it's important to recognize that when you hear things about cost, that's not fully and completely known yet. It is too early to know these things. And it's important to recognize that the Public Service Commission, nor the state, we haven't picked any of these projects. We want to hear the best technologies. We want to hear the best and brightest ideas. This is all very important. And as part of that, it's important to hear public input. And just to give you some updates on where we've been, as mentioned in January, the Commission said that we wanted to take a moment to get some additional ideas from the developers. And that's where we're at right now. We're in the process of getting some new ideas from the developers to keep within, to the fullest extent possible, the existing rights of way. We've heard from the public that that's an important thing, and that's what we're going to try to do. The next step in this is on March 26, just a few days from now, the applicants are asked to propose some dates when they're going to submit new admissions, notices of intent. So this is going to be a very important part of it. We're going to hear some of the ideas forthcoming from the developers. And of course, the public is going to be fully engaged in this process, as it's been all along. One of the things that, again, the hallmark of the Commission's proceeding is the public involvement. To date, communities all across the state have received $355,000 to allow them to participate in a full and complete process. And we would continue to encourage organizations to submit applications for what's known as intervenor funding. There's about $2 million left in that fund. This money has been provided by the developers to encourage and allow public participation. Some of the communities that have received it: Dutchess County, the Village of Athens, Scenic Hudson, Farmers and Family for Livingston, Delaware County, the Town of Milan, and recently Otsego County Conservation. These have all received significant sums of money to help in this process. And to answer one of the questions, in terms of health issues, these are where these questions are going to be answered, is by the participation of the public and the intervenor funding. So,
if the New York State Public Service Commission would be there for
Ma'am,
people
please
and
don't interrupt the
utilities.
presentation.
well, I can trust that the Public Service Commission has been listening and listening carefully to what the public has had to say about this. Rather than give the PowerPoint presentation, I brought down some copies of the literature, including the PowerPoint presentation, for you to take home. There's ways to contact the Commission, as well as some of the recent Commission decisions to kind of spell out where we're at. But Jen, earlier in your presentation, you talked about the high utility prices that we've experienced this winter. I'd like to make this brief observation that one of the reasons you saw this increase was in part because of congestion that exists. We have a capacity of energy in upstate New York. We're unable to get it down the transmission because it's because it's old. Couldn't get the juice down to lower Hudson and other parts of the state. So that's one of the reasons why we experienced the record high prices that we did. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to...
We'll have questions.
I'm happy to answer any questions you might
I
have.
understand what your statement was. Just, we've been getting electricity for eons down here,
Mhm.
and now all of a sudden, it was a 110% increase in my energy bill from last year to this year.
There were primarily two factors which drove your utility bills this winter. One, demand. The demand for electricity and natural gas were record highs.
Okay, but natural gas is a glut in this country.
Natural gas generates 50% of the power used in the state of New York. But these high prices were not just in the state of New York. It was throughout the northeastern United States.
How are those prices
Ma'am,
made?
this is not a debate. This is a panel
No,
discussion.
I'm just
There will
asking
be
a
questions afterwards. Please give the other people a chance to hear and ask questions. Thank you, Jim. Let me. Okay. Next, I'd like to welcome. We're not into questions yet, and we will after the presentation, sir. Okay? We want to devote time for honest questions and answers. Okay? Next, I'd like to introduce Thomas Rumsey. He's Vice President of Marketing and Communications for New York Independent System Operator. That's ISO. And they manage the reliability of the grid and administers wholesale energy markets. I think you're in for an education. I first listened to Tom over in Newburgh at a seminar, and I think you're going to learn a heck of a lot about how it's all shipped around New York State. So, Tom, here it is.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Jennifer, for the invitation down here. I'll say that now before I take all the questions later. For most of you, you've probably not heard of the New York Independent System Operator, so let me give you just a quick update of who we are and what we do, because I think it's important to understand where we're coming from. We're a nonprofit, so nothing that happens on the grid or nothing that happens through the tariff hits our bottom line. We were formed by the state to operate the grid and then run the markets, and I'll go through that shortly. We're also independent. We're not a government agency, and that was, well, I'll explain why that is here in a second. So we have 4 key roles for the state. Before we were the New York Independent System Operator, we were the New York Power Pool. In 1965, there was a blackout. And as you saw in the earlier charts from John, the grid grew up from the bottom up. It was not centrally planned, as that red spaghetti chart clearly pointed out. Well, in 1965, there was a blackout for, I wasn't here, I'm not a native New Yorker, but, and I wasn't, thankfully not that old, but close. There was a blackout. And the primary reason was there wasn't any coordination from the left and the right. You had vertically integrated utilities that owned the transmission, the generation, and the distribution networks. And so they owned the whole thing. And when the blackout occurred, there was no lateral coordination. There was no central control. And because of that, they formed the New York Power Pool. And that was formed in 1966, and we took control of the power grid in 1970. Since that time, we've been operating the bulk electric system to all the NERC, SIP standards, all those things for the state. We don't own any assets. The generator, or the transmission owners still own the assets, but we do manage them, and they have to schedule their outages through us. Every 6 seconds, we manage the grid because we can't store electricity. Every 6 seconds, we have to send a signal to the generators to balance the fleet. Very intense job. So that's primary, and again, you'll hear reliability from us. That's our goal. That's our primary mission, is maintaining reliability. Then in 1996, under Bill Clinton, there were a couple of FERC orders, 888 and 889, that restructured the electric industry. Basically, what he tried to accomplish there was introduce competition to the wholesale energy market. And there was a couple of reasons for that. One, he wanted he and the Congress wanted to have open access to the transmission lines, because new technologies like wind were coming on the grid. And back then, if the utility, which owned all 3 aspects of it, didn't want wind wouldn't get on the grid. And so if you wanted to build a wind farm, you had no way to access the transmission lines. So they opened up the transmission lines into open access, so you can't be denied. In other words, if Phil over there wants to build a plant, he can build a plant anywhere in the state that he can get it permitted, and the owning transmission owner has to allow him to interconnect to that transmission line. In 1996, the PSC, through the Competitive Opportunities Proceeding, ordered the transmission owners to divest the generation. What they said was they did not want vertically integrated transmission owners to own all 3. And that did a couple of things. By the way, the whole country didn't go that direction. About 2/3 of the country did, but not the entire country. Some of you have very vertically integrated utilities still in the south, in Georgia with Southern, and out in the northwest where you have a lot of Pacific and hydropower. But in New York, we did. We divested the electricity, or the generation from the utilities. And the key reason for that was in the vertical structure. Either way will work, and the reason I point out the whole country didn't do it is either way will work. I'm just explaining where New York is now. When they said divest the generation, that did one very important thing. Any new generation was now at the risk of the shareholder and the banks, no longer the utilities. In the vertical integrated structure, the utility, when they wanted generation, would go to the Public Service Commission, provide a prudency check, and the PSC would then authorize to put it into the rate case. In other words, they would get a rate of return on any generation they added. Now, through markets, and with the market structure, private investment comes in, builds the generation, and takes the risk of that generation. Okay? That risk should not be understated, as we've seen, and I'll go through in a couple minutes. The other thing we do is we are the planning. We do the technical planning for the state. We're the technical advisors to the state energy plan. We do a 10-year outlook, and then we back that in to make sure that the state has the resources it needs. And we also, our fourth mission statement is to advance the technology infrastructure. We just finished a large smart grid project for the bulk system where we got half of it paid through the DOE, and that was incredibly helpful in Hurricane Sandy. We plan to have 2 contingencies on the grid, which is your 2 largest things. Going out during Hurricane Sandy, we had 93 power lines out, and we were able to stay synchronized, which means we didn't black out the whole state, which you saw when we became unsynchronized in 2000, I think it was 3, from the blackout in 03. So the technology we didn't have in 03, we had for Hurricane Sandy, and it helped us keep the lights on. All right, so we heard a little bit all BMPs. Let me discuss why we went with locational based pricing. Since 2000 to 2012, 80% of the generation that's been cited, which is a little over 10,000 megawatts in the state total, has been down in the area of greatest need. And that was because the market signal that said the local price, this is where the investment is most needed. Again, that wasn't how every market was formed. ISO New England had a single price for the New England states. So where do you think all the generation was built? In Maine, because it was cheap and they could permit it. So then what did they have to build after that? All the transmission to connect it to Boston. And so they had the generation cost and then roughly $15 billion of transmission costs. When the transmission does stay with the ratepayer. So the locational pricing is the idea you only want to pay once. Whatever the solution is, it's not generation biased, it's not transmission biased, it's not demand response biased. It's whatever solution to get the megawatt where it's needed by any solution available. New transmission has also come on, in the region where it's needed most in the last roughly 10 years. And again, this is all through 2012. We're crunching the numbers from last year, so we should have that out in about a month. Here's something that I don't think a lot of people realize. Since competitive markets in 2000, carbon dioxide from power plant emissions have gone down 37%. Sulfur dioxide is down 94%, and nitrous oxide is down 80%. That's incredible. That's incredible. That leads the nation. That's an incredible environmental performance while you're adding 10,000 megawatts, right? And I think that is a testament to the PSC, the DEC, and the generation asset owners, and the transmission owners. Here's the cost of retirements. In 2008, we saw the first decline in power since the Great Depression in the country. And we were not immune to that in New York State. This is a generic cost curve since 2009. The yellow bars, for those in the back, that's the number of retirements we started seeing across the state. So as the price came down, you started seeing a lot of older generation retire. Pretty much all of the coal is retired except for maybe 2 or 3 plants in the state. And you're really, as we've heard people discuss, moving, the natural gas revolution, you can call it, has had a big impact on that. But as prices come down, this excess generation, the 4,000 that we had upstate, is by and large disappeared. And we have seen significant retirements in this area, as many of you are aware. So let's talk new capacity zone. We have an independent market advisor that reports directly to FERC. And their role is to ensure that the markets are working and that it gives FERC oversight so they're not just taking our reports. This group is on our calls every morning at 9 o'clock where we review the outcomes of the markets the day prior to see if there anything happened that we didn't anticipate, and if it did, why. Back in 2007, they noticed what we call a deliverability issue. And this is the congestion that we're talking about, and I got a map that'll show it. And their view is because of that deliverability issue, then you have a gap between what you need and what you can deliver. When we started the markets in New York State, there were 3 capacity zones: Long Island, New York City, and then rest of state. Those are the 3, okay? And Long Island, because if you don't build it on island, it's very difficult to get it there. New York City, because of the underground system, is very similar. There's also a reliability rule for New York City that 85% of the generation has to be within that zone because they don't want to black out New York City during a thunderstorm. They don't want to take the risk of the transmission lines. So there is an inherent amount of generation that has to be built in that zone. So in 2007, he put it in the State of Market Report. In 08 and 09, and you know, we take his report, we look at it, and we take some of his recommendations. We don't do them all. We didn't act on this one. In 08 and 09, we saw power go down. In 2011, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued what they call a compliance order, which basically directed us to study whether or not the independent market monitor was correct in that there was a deliverability issue and a growing gap between supply and demand in the lower Hudson. So we spent about 2 years doing those studies with our stakeholders and shareholders in the Public Service Commission. And in 2003, we presented to the FERC our process for, or the results of that study, which did validate that there is this gap and there is this congestion, and the process by implementing a new capacity zone. We filed in October of 2013, and we, with the Public Service Commission and the transmission owners, requested a phase-in. A lot of people don't realize we also filed for the phase-in and wanted to phase in the impacts of the capacity zone. 2013, I won't go into the demand curve, it's a little bit too technical, but the rehearing is the natural process where when FERC gives an order, you can seek rehearing if you disagree with what they've done. And then they take that rehearing on request, and they can either accept your challenge and modify their order, or they can say, no, we want to stick with what we had originally ruled. And then it can go to the district court in DC. So the rehearing was the next step once they gave us our order that approved our process and what we had put in. They did not approve our phase-in. They did not accept the idea of the phase-in. So we, with the transmission owners and the PSC, are seeking rehearing on the phase-in and asking them to reconsider that. And as they discussed, in 2014, well, the end of this month, a new capacity zone will take effect with the summer capability auctions. So why the new capacity zone? I won't poke it in anybody's eye, I promise. So last time I was here, there was a lot of discussion, is this being driven by New York City or is this being driven by Long Island? The truth is, when we formed these markets, Long Island and New York City were already a capacity zone. It has nothing to do with those 2 locations. It has to do with Leeds PV right there. And to answer the question earlier, how many megawatts to make it go away? 1,600 megawatts is the gap of deliverability right now. Since 2011, you've had 1,700 megawatts retire in this zone. The Energy Highway, and so you hear a lot of answers. How can we fix this? And I see Central Hudson here, and we differ on some of those, but they are my colleagues and they are my friends. The Energy Highway was intended to at 1,000 megawatts. And right now, if everything goes, it'll come online in 2018. It'll do a couple things. One is it'll unlock upstate renewables. There's a fair amount of drive to have renewables and energy efficiency answer this question. The challenge with the renewables in New York State is wind will be built where the wind blows, and that is in the North Country. There is some limited wind resources in this area, but exceedingly limited and not enough to really make a dent of the challenge that we have. So that only exacerbates the problem of the congestion. If you're going to add the wind in the North Country, it's still going to run into that choke point. Right now, we are anticipating 200 megawatts a year in this zone of growth. So by 2018, the Energy Highway will have kept up with load growth. but it won't have addressed that 1,600 megawatt challenge that you have today. And that's assuming nothing else retires, okay? So that's where we believe the Energy Highway is a great idea. We think it's, I mean, the genesis of the Energy Highway was the age of the infrastructure and that it had to be replaced and upgraded. The new capacity zone puts out a financial signal, but by the time it's online, it will have maintained what we believe will be the load growth in the zone. The other one is energy efficiency. Energy efficiency in the state has been exceedingly successful on the energy side, which is how much you use every day. Where it doesn't, and it hasn't helped us, is on peak demands. We've set 3 records for New York State in the last 9 months. 3 records, okay, of peak demand. So on the day-to-day, energy efficiency has been very effective. And no one can really explain why, but there's a lot of theories, but the peak demand hasn't come down. And peak demand is when you have your challenges. Peak demand is when PJM had blackouts, when Cal ISO had blackouts. We've not had those. But we've got a plan for peak plus reserves, okay? Almost done. There's been a lot of discussions on financial impacts. The large blue line was the initial, some of the numbers, I think it was $350 million a year. That was never, the stakeholder process you saw was 2 years. There were a lot of things to get discussed and debated in that 2-year period. That was never submitted to FERC. That was never a final recommendation by the board from the NISO. So that number was, that blue line was, I just wanted you to see where that came from. So the blue line that you can see, or the big one, if you're way in the back, was not, that's where the 350 came from, but it was never a filing. What we recommended is if you look on the second one, the black line is where you're at today, and that's roughly 185. If you look at the one to the right, that's what, it goes to 198. That would have been new capacity zone with the phasing. That's what we filed. What FERC approved was the red line, which is 379 because the phase-in was denied, so the impact of the capacity zone occurs immediately. The green line, and again, there's a discussion that, will this have any effect, right? Is anybody going to respond to this? Well, there's a plant in here that many of you are familiar with, probably Danskammer. That thing was being sold for scrap 5 months ago. It was going to be sold for scrap, for the metal that it had. Now they're looking at repowering that plant. When they closed that plant, 2 schools were closed. That's how big of an impact on that local community. So I don't know how you get a more stark example of people responding to the market signal. And when that green line happens, that's when Danskammer comes in. That's how much of an impact one plant can have, okay? The green line would reduce the, not only bring the plant back, and in our world, add critical megawatts in an area that we were short. Last summer, we called demand response 5 days in a row. Demand response is one of the last steps before shutting loads, which means we're cutting your power off. That's how tight it got. So getting the megawatts in this zone was critical. And that plant is responding to the market signal. So what else is out there? Danskammer right now is looking to repower. They just announced with the PSC, and the PSC extended them an extension, but they're bringing some of it back this year and hope to repower the whole thing by next year. This is all public, obviously. If not, it is now. Bull Line 3, I'm sorry, what's the question? They just filed to repower to natural gas. Yes, they've got 2 on gas, and they're looking, if you get Central Hudson can probably speak to it, they're looking, it's a coal plant now, and we just took the tour of the facility with the DEC, and so if they were to repower the coal plant itself, it would be limited by how many hours it could run, but they filed with the PSC to repower it into a natural gas plant. That was announced 2 days ago. Well, let me get through this, and I'll be glad to address your solar farm.
Getting off the subject here.
So, I just I'm not afraid of the question. I just want to finish the chart.
We need to stick to what he's doing now. It's
So
not
here-
questions and answers.
Yeah. Here's what's public in terms of responses to the zone. Bull Line 3 is a generation project that could be online by 2016. CPV just cleared their mitigation analysis by 2017, and Cricket Valley is 1,000 megawatts. Now on transmission, the transmission owner, I love this, TOTS, Transmission Owner Transmission Solutions, was approved by the PSC, and that's going in place by 2016, 450 megawatts. Champlain Hudson is a DC line into the city, and then the New York Energy Highway, which you've heard about tonight. The cost of the new capacity zone is not a tax, it's not a tariff. What it is setting a supply and demand cost to electricity. You can see, and the purpose of the bar charts was to show when new resources come in, prices will go down. When these happen by 2017, capacity prices will be lower then than they are today. They will. You don't have to believe me, but they will. So, and I think that was my last chart. I tried to speed through it. So that's the intent. Like I said, and I will remind you, I'm probably the only one up here besides you. We're not trying to pitch projects. We don't make money on this. Our job is to try to keep the lights on down here. People have to understand how tight it is and how tight it got this last summer. And we set 3 peaks. It's not going away. It's not going away. So when you look at the challenge that you have in this area, in the time frame that we have, to a degree, I think there's a lot of positive market activity and a lot of developers coming in. That's a good thing. As we look to the grid of the future and 2.0 with distributed generation and solar, that's not, no one's saying you can't do that. If that's the solution, do it. Do it. There's literally nothing stopping that.
We're not at questions and answers yet, please. There's one other statement, and then we'll go to questions and answers.
All right, one other statement, and then I will go to the questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dern would like to speak as to the PSC's position on the NCZ.
Tom, thank you very much. As we saw at the Marbletown meeting, the New York ISO has a wonderful, wonderful outlook, and it explains the issues very well. This is not something pie in the sky. This is a very real problem. We have the problem, as you heard, is congestion. The issue is, how do you solve it? What do you do to fix this very real problem? Congestion currently costs the state taxpayers about $600 million a year. And one of the things that the Public Service Commission is doing is it continues to press FERC to reconsider the creation of the new capacity zone, because we argue that we can resolve these issues with new capacity lines coming in, as well as some of the other projects that Tom referenced, and some of the new projects, including distributed generation. These are all important elements, but we're hopeful that the projects that we've heard tonight will help mitigate it and reduce or perhaps eliminate the need for the new capacity zone. So we're hopeful for that, and we're also continuing if FERC refuses our request to not move forward with the NCZ, that they allow a phase-in time. And again, that's something the ISO agrees with us on, that some phase-in in order that these projects will come online to mitigate the impact that we're looking at.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. Next, I'd like to open up your questions. I'd like to ask you to ask one question at a time, and it isn't a debate back and forth. There's other people here that really would like to ask questions, and I'd like you to be mindful of everyone else here. Thank you. Legislator Green has her hand up, and I would love to give her an opportunity. Manny, your hand was up. You have a question?
I just think that in this day and age that although it might be nice to remain energy neutral, as is the position and requirement of the New York ISO, we are in a climate crisis. One of my concerns is our rates are going to go up, but there's nothing to incentivize renewables and energy efficiency. And in fact, the four projects that you cited are all fossil fuel. So I want to know from Public Service Commission and from New York ISO, what can be done to incentivize renewables and energy efficiency in this region?
Jim, you want to go?
Energy efficiency is one of the hallmarks of the Public Service Commission. Tom showed a very important chart which shows how good of a job we are doing to improve our energy efficiency. And the Commission has made it clear that it not only fully supports energy efficiency, but it also encourages renewable energy development. through our renewable portfolio standard, we invest billions of dollars over years to make this happen. But the problem that exists is that at certain points of the year, we have that peak, and you have to be able to meet that peak demand for electricity, because if you don't do that, then you do suffer brownouts and rolling blackouts. And that's something that the Public Service Commission would find unacceptable, and I think the public would find that to be unacceptable.
But isn't solar, I don't mean to get into a debate, but isn't solar power one of the best ways to meet peak demand?
Well, there's a whole host of ways to meet peak demand, but one of the problems with solar energy is you can't store it, or at least we're developing technologies to allow you to store it. And that's always been part of the problem with renewable energy. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow, sometimes the sun doesn't shine. So people demand electricity, people need electricity. You need this to support the economy. So what we look for is a balancing of all resources, not just looking at one. We want to ensure that there are resources, and when we talk about resources, we're talking about natural gas, wind, hydro, all these resources, nuclear. These are all important parts of the puzzle.
Yeah, Mana, you and I have had someone just too much electricity over there for somebody.
Got charged.
You know, one of the things that's important, I put solar in my house. It's the challenge with solar, as you know, is the cost. It's an expensive technology today. It is coming down. I'm not going to argue with people, but it's expensive today. There are federal incentives, production tax credits for wind. NYSERDA has very generous, as I learned as I put solar in my house. For the NISO, our role is to ensure that no technology is inhibited by the market structures. And over the last 5 to 6 years, we've modified how wind is able to participate in the markets. In the north where you have wind, you'll actually have, because generators only get paid what it costs them to produce electricity. They're not allowed to bid profit or margin. And if they are, we'll kick their bids out. So they can only bid their fuel costs, labor, and variable costs. That's all they can put in. And we audit them every year to know what those costs are. So wind, because they get a productive tax credit, they can bid like a negative $20 because the productive tax credit will still make them profitable because the fuel's free. So in the north where you have large wind developments, there are times, and it's available on our website, you'll see electricity be a negative number. In other words, the wholesale cost is not only free, it's a negative number. And we're the only market that does that in the country. We do a wind forecasting that allows 98% of the wind that's produced in this state to be used. Compare that to other places where you have a 30% spill, because as the wind comes up, if you've already committed a generator, you're not going to back that down. We don't have that because we can forecast the wind with the wind developers in the project. For solar by and large is a distributed issue. For now, there are some bulk solar. There's one on Long Island, Brookhaven, and we're looking at ways with PSC through distributed energy to aggregate solar and then allow it to bid in, because the best way to integrate renewables is to help them shape the load, not respond to it. And the challenge that you have with renewables, as Jim did say, is it becomes an economic liability if you can't provide reliable electricity. Companies won't go there. And so we have to ensure that we can keep the lights on.
Thank you. Jen?
Just to go back, sorry, to Mana's point, we'll keep going back, but I do agree. I mean, we're at a time where we really have to start thinking out of the box. I would like to see a distributed renewable generation capacity zone, something, and starting to think there are a lot of changes that we could make, regulatory changes at the state level that would greatly increase the incentive to expand solar, like virtual net metering, community net metering. I've never heard this discussed, but why don't we have on-bill financing of solar PV and not just energy efficiency? There are things we can do, not solar, nothing. Well, anyway, there are a lot of things that we can do to bring that cost down. And Citizens for Local Power is Assemblyman Cahill has introduced a bill that we have been really advocating for community choice aggregation that would allow municipalities to aggregate the buying power of their ratepayers within their boundaries and source their power directly rather than, and this could help finance renewable programs. It can help finance energy efficiency. So there's a lot of things that could be done, and I just feel like we should be exploring those options. And if you could talk about that, that would be great. I'm sorry, one question. I know I'm one of those people that keep going back to the geography, but I'm really stuck on it. What if you drew the borders of the capacity zone around Westchester instead of through Greene County, which consumes, on a per capita basis, 13% of the electricity that Westchester does? I can't wrap my head around the fact that upstate New York, there's actually a legitimate reason why we should be paying for as much when the demand is so much lower.
All right, let me take the first question, and then I'll turn it over to Jim. First of all, there's nothing that says this new capacity zone couldn't be called a renewable microgrid, if that's what the title made somebody feel like they could do it. The challenge is the funding, and it's a policy discussion, and really it's up to the policymakers to make that call. But it's difficult to balance to say we want to unbill and do those things, and those are tax dollars and costs. They're going to go to a resource that right now isn't cost competitive. That's the challenge that they're faced with. In terms of the county, unfortunately, capacity zones they're driven by transmission constraints, not geopolitical lines. And so it's the issue of getting the power into the county. It has nothing to do with, we picked these 5 counties. If you look at the overlay of the transmission lines, that's why. Because these counties were served by utilities that grew from the ground up. And so you have that physical infrastructure from the ground up that covered these areas, and then when they interconnected with their neighboring utilities, it's no surprise that it's National Grid, Orange and Rockland. These choke points tend to occur on barriers between the transmission owners. And so it wasn't a political decision, it was a purely engineering discussion. Thank you, Tom. Jim?
Earlier this evening, you heard I heard a phrase, it was said, utility 2.0. And that's a term of art that's being used amongst industry people to describe what will the utility of the future look like. And in December, the Public Service Commission commenced its Utility 2.0 proceeding. And part of that initiative, part of that review is looking at concepts such as distributed generation, microgrids, how consumers can shape their demand and their energy usage in ways that have never existed before. So the Commission is looking at these issues closely. It's working closely with community groups. It's working closely with the industry to try to find the answers to these problems that we're faced with, where we recognize climate change is a problem. So how do we incorporate renewable energy? How do we mitigate peak demand? How do we encourage consumers to play a greater role and participate more, rather than just always flicking on the light switch and expecting that electricity is going to be there each and every time, and it will be, but consumers and the equipment that they use and how we use electricity is going to be different in the future through the use of new and innovative technologies.
It's a word. The key to renewables is storage. And that's batteries, sometimes I'm sorry. And yeah, right. Supercapacitors are one of the solutions. You're absolutely right. We spend a lot of time with that. Eventually, we will have distributed generation on a housetop with solar, and we'll have storage systems in there. So you'll have enough power, and you'll have a subsystem with your critical loads where you can go for a day or two, and then you won't worry about that. And then the neighborhoods will have another gathering spot, and the utilities will actually just maintain the books, and you'll sell into them when you've got excess, and you'll buy from them when you have a need. That would be the right system we need. Actually, the utilities had a company called EPRI, which is their Electricity Producers Research Institute, and they used to all pay into it. It's out in California, Palo Alto. They were at the advanced part of this smart grid technology, which we're now just beginning to start to reap. But when they deregulated, they quit funding a lot of EPRI's work. So the utilities, only a few of them really support EPRI properly now. But they did know that they needed to do new things and look into the future, and they're trying. It's hard to change, particularly when you're in a monopoly type of business. You know, it's hard because you're not used to competition, and they took away the generation. That was a big thing. But then if you take away the transmission, which they really should do, then they would be distributing companies, and that they can do better than anybody else. But they need to get those costs in line with what they really should be costing, especially with the smart grid stuff. So the new utilities are going to be different. And in 5 years, you're going to be different. There are going to be a lot of guys like Boundless. We couldn't have a Boundless 10 years ago, but FERC has made it possible to do this, to find better ways of doing things, and to be more receptive to new technology when it's available. It takes engineers that are paying attention, and they're not just doing the same thing over and over again. You know, you've got to look and see what's available, because there's so much that has been created in the last 10 years. The Germans drove the solar business. You know, they decided they were going to get off of their coal and their nuclear at the same time. So they just bought everything in the world. The price of solar and panels went crazy. And the Chinese got into it and lowered the cost. Quality wasn't there, but so in the process, that's the marketplace, right? We've come a long ways, and the solar's come down. I mean, Lord, the price now, it's less than $1 a watt now. You know, it's competitive, and it's still getting better, because the technology is still coming along. Our lighting is going to be better. You know that. You know, the LEDs are going to take over the whole deal, and we're not going to be wasting this light. This light in here is 10 times as much as it needs to be burning right now. This is a fairly efficient system. And then we go to DC. The billing should be DC. Our computers are DC, our gear is DC, the solar is DC. Let's stay in DC as long as we can. AC was great because we had to have transformers. We could get different voltages for different equipment. You know, Tesla was the guy, and you all know the story between Tesla and Edison, the big battle we had. But America was always at the forefront. And we can do it again, and we will do it again. But we've got all this legacy stuff that's slowing us down because people have vested interests and they've done things the way they've done before. It's hard. Change is always painful. And particularly, to me, the security of the system is a big deal. The way it'll break, the way terrorists can take it out. I'm a military guy, and that's what really got me into this grid business in the first place. And I've got some ideas about how to rewire the grid to make it happen a little better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, just a couple quick comments on that. I mean, the technology exists now to have batteries and solar combined. I have it at my house. I use it as my backup generation. I can go 3 days, disconnect from the grid. I sell when it's high, buy when it's low. That's all great. But there are two issues: scale and cost. In order to power my house, I would have had to cover 3 acres with solar panels. I'm not going to do that. I put it on my roof and tried to help, but to me it was more of an emergency issue when the power went out. Technology is there. Cost and scale is where they're challenged. The other issue was, I was down with EPRI last week. EPRI's still down in Charlotte, live and kicking, and they've just spent a ton of effort on distributed energy resources. And we were down there going through, they just published a paper. I encourage you to go get it. They led it from a technology perspective on smart grid, and they're leading by and large on distributed energy. They have the models out there. It is very real. And we have a great dialogue with the Public Service Commission going, is what policies have to change, what are the markets that have to occur. You know, the storage on the distribution system is an issue. Storage on the bulk system is not an issue because of the technologies, and I know people don't like natural gas, but these gas plants can ramp in 10 minutes. And so we had a 20 megawatt battery storage plant in this state go bankrupt because there was no market for them. And they moved. So the technology's there, but the technology is also spread, and it's a very difficult balance to jump on the new technologies while trying to maintain costs. And I will remind you that in 2012 we had the lowest cost for electricity we've seen in the state in 15 years. So we're starting to uphill climb a little bit because a lot of people couldn't make it in that environment.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Well, ma'am, can you come up and take the mic? Okay. I think we're going to do it that way. Make your question, leave the mic. Okay.
Didn't expect to be at the front.
I'm in the energy efficiency industry, and I have to tell you, it kind of feels like the game is a little rigged, in the sense that the playing field is not level, because, let's face it, the prices of natural gas are low because the government subsidizes the extraction.
Yes.
If the cost of extraction was built into the product, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I would really like to see a level playing field and for us to advocate eliminating those subsidies and maybe, or at least sharing those subsidies with renewables to help level the playing field. By the way, my company is hiring if anyone needs a job, and on-bill recovery financing actually does now fund solar.
Sir, come on up. I'll make you earn the mic.
I'm Brad Will, I'm an alderman in Kingston, and I really appreciate you guys coming here. And I offer some constructive criticism. I like what I'm hearing from John the most. I'll just come out and say that. What's going on, with the transmission lines? I know this is about transmission lines and about FERC and this weird parallel track that's been, a horse race or something about who gets there first. And the FERC should be postponed. I think that's clear. Let's figure things out first. But really, what I'm also hearing is it just feels like a lot of pussyfooting around. I mean, let's get to it. We need a Manhattan project for renewable energy. Parity has been reached. I take issue with anybody who says solar is not there, it can't be done because it has to be stored. We can do micro utilities. We all know that. These are intelligent people in this room. So don't pull the wool over eyes anymore. We need to just get to it and do the right things. There are parabolic solar collectors that collect 70% more now than yesterday's technology did for solar. Solar costs 1% of what it did 40 years ago. So don't tell me that we can't do it. It's just not true. We understand that. So wind can be generated in other places besides just northern counties in New York State. We can do wind in the Hudson Valley. Wind technology has blossomed in the past year or two. All of this can happen. Now I like what one thought that Jim had about phasing in. So let's phase in ownership, community ownership of utilities. Let's have these big companies put in everything they need to for 15 to 20 years, collect all they need to collect, have a golden parachute the way the Central Hudson guys did, get out and go to a tropical island, and then in 15 to 20 years, we'll run the utility companies, okay? So we don't need to have this, it's little half steps, half measures, and we're getting there. And wonderful that we're making the transmission lines more efficient and less, with less health issues. I think that's great. But let's be real. Let's have a plan that is actionable. We get 15, 20 years, just hand it over to folks. We're done. Thank you for putting it in. There are solar companies that are doing this now, the lease to own, right? Yonkers, 10 years, they pay $1 for their LED street lamps. So they pay a reduced rate for the next 10 years, then they're out. And the company that's put them in has made their money, and they leave town. So it's good for them, it's good for the communities. I didn't have a question, I just wanted to say that.
Hi, I'm Randy Hurst from Orange County. Mike, if I've heard anything this evening, it is that the problem is congestion in the transmission line. It's not generation. And the concern that I have is that when Mr. Rumsey mentioned we've got these 4 gas-fired power plants coming online, CPV, Cricket Valley, Dan Scammer, and the other, why? Why are the taxpayers and the ratepayers having to subsidize the construction of a ultimately shale gas migrated system coming into New York and in the entire shale gas pipeline infrastructure to support these new power plants when there are alternatives? I agree with what Jennifer said. I agree with what this gentleman just said, with so much of the other folks too and I am a person who's designed and built my own passive solar home in 1986. I generate all of my own electricity for the last 4 years. I can do this. Other people can do it as well. Now, there are times when I go out on the grid, okay, that's fair, but it's not a big deal. And I haven't paid, I've paid 0 in 4 years for my electricity, my wife and I now. Anyway, I just would like somebody to address why CPV, why Cricket Valley, why shale gas-fired power plants instead of renewable alternatives. Thank you.